Hello, welcome back everyone. It's quite exciting. It's starting to feel like we are building a little bit of a community with NDA, which is awesome. I've had loads of messages on the past few episodes, so keep them coming in. Love to read them, and we're going to be revisiting some of the topics at the end of the season. So we're at the NDA podcast, Insta, Twitter. This week's episode is called the Elusive Inclusive Studio. Of all my topics, I think this might seem like one of the broadest, maybe. I think that's because the issue itself, or the topic, is quite tricky to define or sum up in like one or two sentences. I think inclusivity is a word we hear a lot. We don't often talk about what that means individually to business, in studios, or hear how people are actioning it, not just like tagging it onto their about page or at the end of their job ads. So I'm hoping today we're going to get to unpick it a little bit. Talk about it in a practical sense, like what does being inclusive actually look like? What does being excluded look like? How do you police it, action it, all that stuff. So there's so much to get through, so I'm going to ask everyone to introduce themselves. Ebony, can you kick us off?
Yeah, hello, my name is Ebony Montague. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the founder of HR Said That, which is basically a HR consultancy for the creative industries. And I help organizations to utilize HR to make their workplaces more inclusive.
Awesome. Yi?
Hi, I'm Yi. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a designer, illustrator. I used to work with Katie at Supple Studio, but recently changed jobs, and I'm now based in Bristol.
Awesome. Aries?
Hi, my name is Aries Moross. My pronouns are they, them. I've been the director of Studio Moross now for 10 years, and I'm also on the quest to find out how to create an inclusive workplace.
Yeah. Awesome. And Wale, last but not least?
My name's Wale. I'm a graphic designer. My pronouns are he, him, and I think I'm a pretty inclusive studio.
We'll find out. Awesome. I'm Katie Cadwell. My pronouns are she, her. I'm going to try and ask some of the questions that I'm hoping you're going to be thinking as we go along, but also I'm reading out lots of thoughts and stories, some good, some bad. So let's kick off. We're going to start really, really broad. Wale, I'm going to put you on the spot. The word inclusive, like what does that actually mean to you? If something or somewhere is inclusive, how would you define that?
I feel like inclusivity to me is just the idea that even if I'm not seeing myself, I'm seeing a breadth of, say, cultures, backgrounds, and kind of stories.
Mm.
So, like, places that I've been, always find, like, probably pre-2019, people would say they're inclusive, but when you look around, it's mainly just a bunch of, like, straight white dudes, and then maybe, like, the one black guy or black woman would be in HR, and then when it hits 2020, you kind of saw that those people were being tapped on the shoulders, like, can you speak up? And it's like, I just want to do my job, leave me alone.
Mm.
So that's what inclusivity means to me. And
awesome.
Yeah, I just find that inclusive studio is somewhere that just doesn't really make you feel like you're the token person. Like, you look around and this person may not be black, but I understand their story, or you just find that you're all drawn to the same kind of center points.
Mm.
Hope that answers your question.
It does, it really does. Yi, I'm going to jump to you. What do you think inclusivity means, or what does it mean to you?
Cool. So basically, when you asked if I wanted to be on this, I was sort of like, fuck, what do I know about like being inclusive and what it looks like? I hadn't really like thought about it. But then I did a bit of reading and research and realized that actually I live it, right? Because I just call it by a different name. It's more, for me, it's more like the sort of the vibe of the studio. And I feel like if you have a good studio with good vibes, you feel supported, you feel valued, and feel like your voices are heard. Even though I don't want to reduce this big topic to a feeling, but
no, I think that's an awesome answer. Ebony, how about you? What does inclusive mean?
Yeah, so to be inclusive for me personally is to go into a space and not have to endure any barriers or any issues or discrimination, and know that, yeah, maybe I might be the only Black queer woman in that space, but I'm not gonna be isolated because of those reasons. And it's interesting what Wale said about 2020, where that sort of one Black person in HR was sort of being asked to sort of be the monolith for this sort of movement. I was that one Black person, so it was really funny when you said that. It's like, yeah, that was me in 2020. And that was a really interesting experience, both good and bad. And we might be able to get into that later. But yeah, for me, when it comes to inclusivity in a space, it's like I don't want to have to, endure anything difficult. I should be sort of respected on like a human level, of course, but also respected for my difference and not just tolerated for it.
Yeah. Wow, awesome answers. Aries, you're gonna round us off.
I guess for me, like as someone that desires to be included and also to create inclusivity, like there's two parts to it. I think understanding that there isn't a single approach, and like there literally, if you approach something with a one size fits all, basically every space includes and excludes people naturally through just the way that physics and time and all of these things exist. It's just about creating like a structure that is open to be moved around at all times, and like doors to be opened and shuffled, and it's just about something never being fixed and it always being fluid, not creating or having assumptions about what people need to do their jobs or need to feel safe and to feel included. It's just about something being so open and free from assumption and tokenism and it feels like a ever expanding thing that always needs to be improved and built on. Sorry, that was really abstract.
No, I think it's really interesting that some do feel a little bit more abstract. Like you can't get more abstract than a vibe, but I totally understand that. Like I think a lot of people could relate to that. Like it can feel a little bit intangible, which is why I think it's kind of a difficult thing to discuss. So I really want to I asked this question on Insta, and a couple of people said what they thought inclusivity meant to them. Different people and experiences, but not just that they're there, that they're respected and they're heard, which I think is kind of what Wale and Ebony you were saying. A diverse group, but that doesn't just look like gender and race, that also looks like background and age. I had age a lot, which is really interesting, something we don't talk about very often. Being encouraged to express yourself or share. So I guess that's about being an active member of a studio. Working with good clients, I want to come back to that a little bit later, what clients mean to inclusivity, and feeling safe, which is what we all want. So I just wanted to ask, maybe this might be a little bit more appropriate to Yi or Wale, and Yi, I know you've just been hunting for a job. If a studio says, we're inclusive, what does that give you? Are you like rolling your eyes? Does it feel like it's becoming a bit of a trigger phrase at the moment, or do you think, oh yeah, that's cool?
Yeah, for sure. Like you said earlier, it's such an intangible thing, and when you say you're inclusive, it means different things, different people. Like my needs are going to be totally different to the next person. So when they're like, oh, this is going to be an inclusive studio, I need like actual, like, what do you mean? Like actual things, like we do this or we work this way. Like I need actual definitions of that. Just chucking that word out there, it's the same as like, we're really flexible. It's like, you're flexible this way, but not certain ways. So yeah, it needs to be defined more, even though it's hard to define.
Yeah.
Such a good point.
Yeah, Wale, go for it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat. I feel like when an agency or someone who's interviewing me says that they're an inclusive studio, already by then I've already probably done the research, or I would kind of ask to hear about what clients they work on, or say, look at the makeup of their studio, or like where they're based. So say if you're somewhere like, say, Deptford, but then when I look around, I don't really see people who are not exactly from Deptford, but kind of like make that background, then I get a bit shaky or a bit curious. Because it's like, how can you come to somewhere that's quite diverse and quite like tightly knit, but then have all these people who are quite, say, not of that vibe in a sense? And then it's just like language. So one thing that kind of popped up to me as well is family. And that's something that I've also had to kind of like knock out of my head, because I think when I first came for an interview with Aries, I let out the word like, I want a family to like help me kind of grow. And Aries is like, no. Like we're an agency, we're a business, but we're not a family. And already straight away that kind of makes you go, why have I like put this in my head? Is it like I need a family unit to kind of progress or to grow? Because already that kind of gives you a lot of toxic connotations. And yeah, that's generally my vibe.
Awesome. They're like inclusivity red flags. Maybe there's a book we could make. So that feels like a really good moment to actually be a little bit negative and talk about examples of exclusion. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be personal if you don't feel comfortable sharing that. It could also be we've all got friends or we've all heard horror stories down the pub, you know. So yeah, I feel like maybe Ebony, if you could kick us off with, you know, especially having been in HR, examples of exclusion you've seen or typical examples of being excluded in a studio.
Yeah, I think in my sort of background, I've worked in sort of arts organisations where they had a design studio sort of like in-house, but as a whole, when it comes to that sort of organisation or other organisations I've worked with in Manchester, when it comes to inclusion, particularly after the murder of George Floyd, everyone was so ready to change their recruitment campaigns. Oh, we need to hire more Black people. We need more visible representation. Everyone was so desperate to do that. And inclusion just kind of stopped there. After people were onboarded, that was it. No one was looking at inclusion within their organisations. No one was looking at whether their policies or procedures were really truly inclusive. And actually, asking other staff members, asking my colleagues, some of the experience that I've had weren't inclusive. People unfortunately have been discriminated against. People didn't have like fair opportunities to go for different jobs within the workplace for a whole host of reasons. So actually, inclusion for me, it just was not translating within the workplace. So that's kind of the thing. It's very, for these organisations, inclusion was about what was sort of like front facing. What can we do for our marketing? What can we show to other people to sort of get them to buy into our organisation? But actually the reality within the workplace was actually not very inclusive, which is really unfortunate.
Yeah. Aries, maybe you could share, you've been in the industry a little bit longer than some of the other guests, like examples of being excluded, different types of people being excluded.
I mean, I think as an employer and having to make up this stuff a lot as you go along, especially starting out young, I think, and especially as a white person who was privately educated, like I didn't have a lot of tools that I needed to be a good employer and made many mistakes along the way. I don't want to speak on other people's experiences, like who've experienced exclusion, just in case I say something that is private out loud, even if it's anonymous. So I think slowly, especially, it dawns on you over time how ill-equipped you are to deal with such a vast topic and such an infinite amount of individual experiences for the people who come to work with you. And a lot of the time, you know, you can think you have sort of a general understanding of how to create a space or how to facilitate a workplace to be inclusive, but it's essentially something where there's always a new hurdle.
Sorry, I think my mic died. Can you hear me through my laptop?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, fine. So you'll learn something new, and it's just constantly learning and unpicking. I certainly used to be a lot more I got a lot less boundaried at work as an employer. Like I didn't know how to separate those things as well as I do now. And I think also just managing other people's interpersonal relationships is so overwhelming. It's not just about your relationship with your staff, it's about the people who work underneath you and how easy it is for them to exclude each other or upset each other. And I've been through many like very lightweight disputes, and I've been through big grievances, you know, I've been through it all, and obviously I won't speak on those specific events, but like I know what it's like to manage like quite big exclusions in a workplace and try and navigate them. And I think it's just something that you can't be prepared for. It's something you just have to be enthusiastic about improving.
Yeah. You've got lots of pals in the scene, and you've been in a few studios now. Anything you've heard or seen, and you're like, oh wow, actually in retrospect, that's not a vibe.
Okay. I guess for me it's like to bang on about the vibe thing. Like there are going to be places that I feel more comfortable with. Not necessarily I feel not included in a certain space. It's more that actually this space feels more suited to me because whether it's because the people around me or the work that I'm doing feels more like it's on like my level kind of thing. Again, it's really difficult to like say specifically, but like yeah, for example, in this new studio in Bristol called Hey What, already it feels like, and I don't want to use the family word, but it sort of is like that, because you know, like you spend so much of your life with your work colleagues, and you see them more than your own family. So in a way, it sort of is like you have to lean on them for a lot more than you think you would. And I think, yeah, like this current studio feels like somewhere I belong, and somewhere that I could thrive and actually contribute as well. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Wale, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so say probably 2019 was my year of growth and change. So I went from freelancing for quite a while and working at a place, shout out to Liberty, which was really diverse. It was based in Brixton. And then from there, I went to a studio based in Westminster. Not going to name names, but we were a floor above the Brexit party at that time. That gives you some
Wow.
So we got to see like the whole Extinction Rebellion things that she like right outside our door. But it was like just a complete change in kind of vibes in a sense. So like you felt like you were almost forced to come out, have to go for drinks. There was this energy that just always felt a bit hostile. Like I came in new, and it was like almost like you wanted to compete against everyone. So it wasn't really, it was less about collaboration, more of like whose idea comes first. And where you're kind of starting in new, you're already kind of like already against the wall. You don't know where you're going to go. I just didn't really feel like I was in a safe place, or a place that I felt that I could really mentally relax. So like it got to a point where, say, a month or two in, I was waking up with like panic attacks. I even had to leave the job temporarily due to a massive panic attack. So I was out for a week, where luckily I got counselling, and then I'm sure it's been mentioned on the show about a certain event involving fire in 2017, where it was all about names, and there was a certain name that the creative director wanted to bring up, which was to immortalise the number of people that died in this tragedy. And instantly we were like, that's a really bad idea. Can we like avoid that, or perhaps like reword it in a nicer way, because it doesn't feel like memorial, it feels quite insulting. And head to the ground, it was like, no, we're going to keep this name. And then say a week later, the inquiry came in, and it's like, okay, let's change the name. It's like, oh my god, this could have been so like catastrophic. Why are you doing this? But yeah, that was probably my worst time, and thankfully I left that job just after Christmas.
Yeah.
Actually, I left at the Christmas party.
Did you? I like, even just like listening to everyone's experiences, you can see as varied as what does inclusion mean is also how often people can feel excluded and how all the different ways that manifests, right? So again, had some slightly harder to read DMs when I asked this question. A really common theme is working somewhere where everyone looks the same. It's really hard to establish common ground and create community. So even if they're not actively trying to make you feel othered, you just do by the makeup of the studio. So lots and lots of people said that. Had some more specific ones. Someone working in a studio and they moved to a studio that had steps when previously they didn't. And when they brought it up, there was like studio space is really hard to come by. We don't have anyone that has access needs here. And if they do, we'll get to it. So I think that they thought maybe that felt a bit backwards, like we're kind of going in the wrong direction. Language in the studio. I think this is really interesting. I think this could be a topic in general, but using the word guys to describe the whole team. When you're describing or critting work, using words like feminine, masculine, falling into kind of cliched language when we're in the studio. And then working on projects and campaigns that are against your beliefs, your individual beliefs. So maybe let's chat about that first, especially because Wale, you just mentioned like a client. Is it possible to? Okay, I'm gonna reword this. Can you be a designer in a studio and say, no, I don't want to work on that project because it makes me feel uncomfortable?
I mean, I definitely think with some projects you need to ask consent from people who are working on it, whether they feel comfortable. Like, not every project may require that, but I mean, we created a pre-consent form for projects so that people can not only say, like, I feel uncomfortable, but also being like, I have a strong interest in this topic, which also means that, like, you're not tokenizing or being like, you're gay, work on this. It's like, you can allow people to volunteer themselves for something they feel passionate about. So it works both ways. It's not just about people opting out. It's about like people leaning in on something that they're really super interested in. Both of those things are important.
I would say that's quite rare though. Like,
it's rare.
In studios before where they ask you, like, do you care?
Yeah, I would never think to sort of, I wouldn't think I could say no. Like, even if it was something that I wasn't too keen on, I don't know, I wouldn't think, oh my god, maybe I can say no to this because I've been hired to do the job, surely I should just shut up and do the job. But I do remember at a previous place where a friend was vegan and having to work on like a meat company distributor, and them mentioning that they're not super comfortable, but also like, what could we do? I don't know. I didn't think you could say no, basically.
Should always be able to say no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing to be asked. I think that would be awesome. And then you feel like you've got, I don't know, kind of vested interest in the project because you're really, you're not just being moved around as a resource. It feels like you're actually being chosen because you think that they're going to suit the brief, and it feels like a really, really good fit.
I also feel that's like the vestiges of old studio culture. It's like, I remember when I was in uni, it was always kind of like when people came in, it'd be like, you work hard, you play hard, you're working till 3 a.m. So then you feel like you're being in this place, even if it's like your favorite studio, you feel like you have to always earn the right to be there. So you're like, I got to take everything on, even if you feel like it kind of goes against your ethics. So you're always terrified to really speak out. I mean, thankfully, where I am, which is Studio Moross, I've never had that worry of if there's a project I don't like, I could say no, or a project that I don't feel kind of clashes with my ethics or my persona. I think we vet our projects quite well, and it always feels inclusive. There's always, even if there's things that we probably don't vibe with, we do kind of say like, perhaps we should look at that again, or maybe we can offer a suggestion or such as to how to change that. But yeah, I just feel like it's just that old time boys club, as in you should like you should feel happy that you work here. You're like, be happy that you're in this studio. You're the best. Like, we're the best. Don't regret it.
On like now I don't know the answer to this, but if you're in a, could I come to HR and literally say, I don't want to work on this project, I feel uncomfortable, and then do I have a leg to stand on? Like, is there a policy in place that means that designers can pick and choose their projects, or is it like, no, you've signed a contract, you have to do it?
It's so interesting because I was going to ask something similar, like on the sense that if you are working with a client that has been disrespectful to staff, like how is that managed? Because from a HR standpoint, because it's not happened from an internal employee, there's not a lot we can do, unless sometimes people have terms like if there's like a dispute, we're going to end the contract and that's it, we're not going to work with you again. But unfortunately in other environments I've worked in, some of them have been like, continue to work with external artists or other organisations, even when in the past they have not treated staff well. And it is just about, they sometimes have really good relationships with the senior management, they don't want to break that, especially like high level artists who bring a lot to the organisation and the local area. They don't want to stop working with them, even if they are a pain to work with. So unfortunately, employees will come to HR with the issue, but I'll say, unfortunately, there's nothing a lot I can do if that senior manager still wants to work with them. But I did want to throw the question back to you all as well, like, has anything like that happened to you before, or how would you go around a situation like that? Like if you had an external client that was being disrespectful or not following in line with your maybe inclusion policies in-house, how would you go about that?
I mean, it happens all the time, because most people most clients have dark sides, I think, and I think it's hard to stop those impacting your employees. I've had to reprimand clients for their behaviour, and I've had to sit down and have a one-on-one call to call out specific employees in an organisation. And it's not the same as like a traditional grievance, but it's like, this is me bringing you a grievance for your company to deal with your employees who are behaving a certain way. But it's a really good point, Ebony, like why don't we have business to business or interpersonal business structures that we agree on these softer terms that aren't like legal or logistical. Like we should also have ways of communicating which is about boundaries and respect. And we kind of have recently I've been working on a sort of, if you work with us, this is the deal sort of document that people sign, like a boundaries agreement basically, but that's not legally binding, is it? But it's just something you can hope for.
I did have a point. So in HR, there's a term called a psychological contract, and it's usually between the employer and the employee. And it's kind of like unspoken terms, but like really foundational terms that like just exist, like basic levels of respect. I'm going to show up to work on time. And it's kind of like needing the same for that when you work with clients, like you said about boundaries and things like that. Like we agree by working together that we are going to respect each other. You're going to respect my employees. We'll deliver work for you on time, things like that. But if you do break those terms, then we have a right to end the contract and not work with you again. And I think it's really great to hear that you've been able to speak to clients and be able to address those. Was unfortunately I've been in situations where people haven't been willing to address them with external clients. They've just been like, well, that's how they work, that's how their team works, we just have to deal with it. They bring too much revenue to our organization, so we're just gonna have to settle with it. And I think it's really important to do that for your employees as well, to be able to show that you're willing to protect them, you're willing to show that you care about them and that you're not going to allow anyone to disrespect them within the workplace. Because if you do, it's kind of like, what else are you willing to tolerate from other clients as well?
Totally. And I think it's especially if you're working at a smaller studio where maybe the whole team has a bit more face-to-face interaction with the clients, so there's not project management, they're not protected by anyone. So, and I think I don't want to speak on your behalf, Aries, but I think as people get older, the line and your boundaries become much clearer. Experienced. Where that line is and where your boundaries are, they become less foggy, and you kind of know it's a bit clearer to see when someone's crossed the line. But like, so yeah, I know you've worked in studios where you're in the meetings with the clients, and as one of the more junior members of the team, what would it have taken for you to go, actually, I didn't appreciate that, and would you have gone to your boss and kind of reported back, or would you just gone, well, everyone says that clients are dicks and this client's a dick, so...
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's easier. No, I think that the kind of bad behaviour gets swept under easier when you're a junior or lower down. Like if you had to work with a client directly and they're behaving like dicks, that kind of thing just gets like swept away. But it's not until like the founders of companies, the creative directors that experience it, they sort of have the power to sort of stop that behavior, or even just like ditch that client completely. Like as a junior or midweight or whatever, you just sort of have to deal with it. Your bosses might be like, well, you can sort it out this way or this way, but they would never go, oh yes, why don't you ditch the client? It has to escalate to a higher level before something or action is taken, which I guess, yeah, it's still a thing, I think.
Yeah. I guess, like, Wale, when you're freelancing and you've kind of seen a few different ways of working, would you have felt comfortable always going to your superior to kind of say, I had this interaction, whether that was with a client or even like internal? Is it always, you know, as easy as just kind of saying, actually, I want to talk to you about this and sharing?
I mean, there's two layers to that. One, I feel like when you're a freelancer, you feel like you're already on shaky ground. And then there's the race aspect. So I'm not sure if it's the same for you, Ebony, but I'm sure you've had to kind of, not exactly code switch, but have to just make yourself small, like capable, but also to the extent where you don't want to kind of like tread on toes. You want to like police everyone, but not also antagonize people. So you kind of like keep your grievances very small and try to like not focus on those problems. Even if it's like, say, perhaps microaggressions, things like, oh, you're very well spoken. It's like, yeah, I am. I did public speaking. Duh. It's like stuff like that. So you just try to like not want to address those things and just kind of hope that maybe they'll talk to the wrong person. Like you said, it's more of a clash of like when it's power against power is when you kind of see those changes. And yeah, I hope it's changed in the last 2 years, but it's a rarity. And yeah,
that's a really great point you made, Wale, about there is that extra layer of when you are a black person in a space, when you want to raise an issue or a grievance, you have to be so conscious of how you deliver that. Like, I am always very conscious of the way I speak or my tone, because I don't want to be labelled as an angry black woman, even if something has angered me. Like, there was an instance where I've had to raise a grievance about racism that I witnessed within the workplace, but I then endured further gaslighting within the situation. I had to just not in sort of take it, but just address it as formally as possible. Like, I couldn't just then like lash out or just be like, well, actually, this isn't okay, and this is not how you address it. Like, it's just like kind of, you have to like kind of coax people and like educate them in a way, and it's just very, that can be really infuriating because it goes at a pace where it's like I'm having to educate you at the same time whilst during this. So yeah, it can be really annoying in the workplace and infuriating, and I feel like it is good to talk about it because to get people to understand what we have to endure when we do raise grievances and issues within the workplace. There is a lot more work to do in terms of supporting colleagues and how to raise grievances, and especially ones where they're not really understanding what microaggressions are. And I have worked with clients recently actually on reviewing their grievance policies where they are more person-centered. So the person raising the grievance gets extra support, maybe from someone external from the same protected characteristics, someone that has lived experience as well that would come in and really support them. So it's not, the onus isn't on the person raising the grievance to then educate the staff members or their manager whilst raising their grievance.
That's so important.
Yeah.
I think even just like you mentioned gaslighting, some of these experiences are really hard to prove. It's easy to prove that you don't have disability access to your studio, but it's not easy to prove a microaggression that you experience in a meeting, or an inappropriate look or energy from a client. So how does that put people off? Because some of those like intangible things, you go to your boss and it might feel a bit like you're being a bit dramatic, or I don't know.
I think though, like evidence-based grievances, like what so often in businesses we wait for these huge moments where we need evidence and reporting and investigations, and like the solution is not that. The solution is to like engage with really small nuanced stuff early, and like have a space where you can talk about it and ask questions, and not require an investigation to like work out if like someone said something that made you feel uncomfortable. Because in a workplace where there are diverse people, there are going to be uncomfortable people, because we will not understand everything about each other's intersections. So like someone will say something and it will make you feel weird, and you might just need to talk to someone about it. It doesn't necessarily need to be like a full report of getting someone, you know, a warning. It can just be like, hey, like, I'm not sure I like it when you call me that, and that needs to be made more normal, I think, just this idea of conversing around small topics and communicating between us, and having a space where people feel comfortable to like just say, hey, that made me feel a bit weird, or I'm not sure about that, or did you see what that client said? Do you think it was this? Just a space where you can have those chats like without fear, and like with confidence that people will listen to you, believe what your point of view is before, you know, I really feel like those are solutions to avoiding major grievances and major discrimination in the workplace, is tackling the smallest, tiniest crumbs so early, like so they don't turn into like boulders later on.
Yeah. Who is that person that you go, because if it's the creative director or the founder, and you're trying to keep an eye on everyone and being as available as that all the time, then I don't know how you would, you know, also run a business and do all that new biz stuff and the creative. But some smaller studios, well, often smaller studios say, we don't need HR, we don't need that external person. So like whose role do you think that should be?
We have a pastoral manager, which I would recommend to like any company, which is not an HR person, but it's someone who's not employed by the company, who each of our staff meet with regularly, and if they have anything private that they want to discuss, they can. And then that pastoral manager has like their consent if they want to open up a wider conversation. And also multi-level check-ins. People have check-ins with their managers, with me, with pastoral managers, just like about making sure there's time for everyone to have a conversation.
Is that easier, Wale, like being able to go to someone kind of neutral almost?
Yeah, because like Aries said, you don't feel like they're almost attached to the business, so you're able to kind of talk to them, air grievances, and kind of like hash it out. So maybe it's like, have you thought about it this way? Have you spoken about this? Do you have anyone in the studio that you can kind of like confide in, or like who's your line manager? Do you want to chat about this? Or like, I feel like you hear it from like your close ones and you don't really acknowledge it. When you hear it from someone who you know is actually impartial, in a sense, you kind of see the bigger picture and know like, how can I approach this in a way where I don't feel like if I show a bit of emotion, I'm going to. Because, like, I mean, Aries said we lift the table. I can lift the table high. So it's like, so they don't see it as like, oh crap, is he going to like flip out? Because, yeah, it's weird. And it's like something that I've seen a lot. So, like, here's just a quick caveat, as in, I went to this event called Where Are the Black Designers, which was a lot of black creatives they did a meetup in Great Portland Street. So it was just like seeing a lot of black creatives, like photographers, artists, and so on. And one thing that kind of came up to me is that a lot of them work up in startup agencies rather than like design studios, which was kind of like shocking to me. And then from that, a lot of them were saying that, oh yeah, some of our friends had like moved to America, which is when you think about American race, you think, wow, that's insane. But it's always the story of it. It's really subtle here, and it gaslights you. It makes you feel like you're literally going insane if you don't kind of, perhaps the same, it's not the best term of words, but you're kind of like losing your mind if you even address it or you want to speak about it. So it's like, I'd rather go somewhere it's up front. If someone wants to call me the N-word, they'll call me the N-word, and I'll move on with my life. We go outside, we slap faces, move on with my life. And it's just bizarre to me.
Wow. I was listening to you and I've completely lost my train of thought. I was going to ask.
Sorry.
No, it was all good. I was just paying attention. I was going to ask, so you've worked at slightly smaller studios where there definitely is that kind of like, isn't that buffer between you and the boss. So has that stopped you from maybe, like Aries said, bringing up stuff a bit earlier and having to wait till it feels really serious and like you've got some proof before you kind of raise a topic?
Yeah, I think for sure, because when you're such a small studio, you don't want to upset the balance. So you work with them every day, and like they're gonna know it's them. Do you know what I mean? But that's why I think that you guys have like an external person that's out of this business, almost out of the industry as well. Yeah, I think that would be, if that was like the norm, that'd be great for everyone, that they can literally air out everything and not having to worry about repercussions, or because there's always going to be that black mark next to your name that's like, this person brought up this thing, and it never goes away. And somehow I feel like in a larger agency where there's more people, that might actually be easier to implement, because there's just so much more people, and you're not, it's just less focused on you almost. It's like you're amongst everyone else that, I think,
Totally. So like, just if someone was listening, right, and they work in a slightly smaller studio, they don't have a HR body or someone impartial, and they want to go and take something to their boss, but I think people can be a little bit defensive when you're take it as like a personal attack. So how do you get around that? How do you have a constructive conversation when someone's on the defense?
There needs to be greater support for line managers built into like training for them, and how to not be defensive, and how to really support staff. Like, I appreciate people have targets, people have things that they need to complete, so it's kind of like, well, we don't have time for this right now, can we put it aside, whatever. But there really needs to be greater line manager support in the pastoral sense, like Aries was saying, like really understanding how to support this employee when they do bring up an issue, even if it's not a formal grievance, and having the emotional intelligence to really sit with that and be like, okay, how can I address this? How can I resolve this issue?
Yeah.
It's something that I am sort of working on with clients as well. But you know what? There are resources out there. That there are a lot of people already working in the creative industry and how to sort of make workplaces more inclusive. There's like the Other Box that do really great consultancy as well. And there are others in terms of maybe inclusion when it comes to recruitment as well. So I know a lot of free resources as well. So people do need to sort of do their own research in that. And I appreciate that it's a journey, and not everyone's going to get it right the first time. And I think people are afraid of that. I think, Aries, you mentioned that earlier, that people don't want to say the wrong thing, but actually, like, you're not going to get it right all the time. I don't get it all right all the time, and I work in HR, and it's okay too. So as long as you have the emotional intelligence to sort of be like, okay, I'm learning this, I'm going to apply it in this way, and I'm just going to build on top of this, then at least you're trying.
Yeah, I think we have to be, as employers anyway, we have to be used to feeling uncomfortable, and we have to be realise that it's not personal. And by making things personal, it's a lot more harmful. Like, you have to, I think when you depersonalise yourself within a company as much as possible, and you create that boundary, you also then remove a lot of harm that you could potentially do, and also it means you don't become defensive, because you realise that things are going to happen. And, you know, I did a talk recently that was like, if something bad happens in your workplace, it's your fault, basically. And like, was trying to explain that concept that like everything under your roof is your responsibility. Every single thing, even if someone else makes a mistake, you have the power to remove those mistakes from happening. Like there's something, like you said, Ebony, about training, or is it about access, or whatever it is, it's like, it's your responsibility. And that is like overwhelming, but also like it's kind of a relief if you take it away from a personal thing, and it's just like, oh, you just have to make it better all the time. Like everyone in the team also can help. Like as a team, we work together to improve everything together, policy, action, communication. Like it's not all on you, it's a team, it can be a team project as well. Like if it's done in a way that people feel safe raising their opinions, of course, but I hate the idea of people taking a problem to a manager and the defense. Like I know what it feels like, that defensive instinct to just be like, you're overthinking it, or you know, it's not my problem, or trying to argue something. You just have to not argue and just listen, and then like take a minute and go away and think about what you can do better. And that would be my advice to a manager. Obviously I can't speak to an employee, but for an employee, I think unfortunately, like you might have to do the work, especially if it's discriminatory. I feel like there's things like how to frame a grievance or something you want to bring up so that the person doesn't feel defensive about it, which is messed up. Like it shouldn't be the way it is. You should be able to say that thing you said was sexist without that person being defensive, but you could say something like, it felt this way, or it could be perceived as a sexist comment. I mean, that's distancing and diminishing it, but in some ways, if you're feeling like you're in an uncomfortable situation with your boss, obviously you should be able to be that direct, but there might be ways of kind of like softening the complaint so that it maybe doesn't make someone as defensive. And I'm not saying I agree with that concept, I'm just saying that that might be useful. I've done that with clients. I've said, this could be perceived a certain way, or think about the context of this, and often the client will be like, oh yeah, you're right, and it's fine. Whereas if I was saying, you've had a really shit idea and it's going to hurt people, then they might be a bit more defensive about it. I don't know what other people feel about that approach, but it may be useful.
Yeah, vibes with me.
If what is the reaction you'd want if you went to your boss with something like, say you're sat opposite Aries, and you kind of, sometimes I think when you finally have that moment where you take something to someone, it can kind of pour out of you a little bit, like you've held it all in, and it probably can be quite intense to receive. We don't really think about what that's like to be on the receiving end of that. But and Aries said to you, Wale, I've really heard you, I want to go away and think about this, like in this exact moment I'm not in the right place to kind of respond to it. Would you be like, yeah, that's fine, or would you be looking for in the moment some kind of, do you know what I mean? Would you want a reaction in the moment, or would you be satisfied if they kind of took a second to figure out what their response was going to be?
I think it's only human. Like, not everyone is a vocal wizard and are able to like conjure up a really suitable response in that exact moment. And if they are, I'm going to assume you're lying, but that's just a person. So yeah, I feel like I would, if I did have to air a grievance to Aries about someone, or about Aries themselves, they would them kind of stepping away and saying like, let me think about this, and then I'll get a response to you. I'd probably feel like my anxiety is like ramping up, because that's terrifying. But at the same time, at least I know it's been heard and it's being like processed, as opposed to like being shrugged off, or I'm gonna suddenly like paint a target on my back. Isn't like, if I make a mistake now, will it be like my last shot at this job, or will I have to kind of find another option just in case I need to like get out straight away?
We could also, I was just, as you were chatting then, I was just thinking you could flip it. So it could be, it's not necessarily just stuff that goes on from employer to employee, it's stuff that's happening amongst employees and other, you know, your colleagues making you feel uncomfortable. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Yi. Either if someone came to you and tried to like speak to you about a way you were behaving that was making them feel a certain way, or you going to an employee, how do you see, you going to one of your colleagues, sorry, how do you see that conversation going down? Can you see that, like, does that feel a little bit less intimidating than the kind of employer-employee dynamic?
Oh yeah, for sure. Do you mean like if I had a problem, I'd feel more comfortable
going straight to the person?
Oh, straight to the person. Depends on the person, I guess. Depends on what they've done. Yeah, I think I've been fortunate to have good bosses, so I think I would bring it up with the boss if I did have a problem with someone. Whether or not they then sort of do the right things, and that's a different matter. But yeah, I think I'm also really against like confrontation. So it'd have to take a lot for me to raise an issue. But I think it's right to do it early on, to let it simmer away until it becomes like a massive deal.
And not that I imagine this would ever happen, because I've worked with you and you're a delight to work with. But what if someone what if someone had some kind of issue or wanted to bring something up to you? How would you like them to do that? Would you want them to come to you? Would you want it to be like offhand in the kitchen, or do you want it to be slightly more escalated and has the boss involved in it? Like, how would you want them to kind of approach you?
As in, if I've done something
that's upset them or made them feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think I'd want them to come direct to me first, because I'm probably oblivious to what I was doing. So I think just as a respect thing, coming to me first, and then if it needed, if I didn't agree with it, then escalate it to higher ups. Yeah, I think that would be the right. I'm not sure if that's the right one, actually, right move.
Yeah. I've got a couple more questions, so I'll just whiz through these. Do we think it's a lot easier to be inclusive around the things that you have experience in? So obviously we are all coming from very specific viewpoints with particular characteristics, and so it's obviously a little bit easier maybe to identify and figure out how to create an inclusive environment for those characteristics. So do we think that that's the case? And if it is, how do we make our inclusivity a bit broader than that, I guess?
It's definitely the case, I think. But I think one of the things is that you have to learn that every single individual has a completely unique perspective and like unique experience. So even if I'm trans or I'm queer, or those things apply to me, they'll apply to someone else in a very different way, and the ingredients list is going to be completely different to that person's experience. So obviously I might be a better employer of trans people because I'm trans, but that doesn't mean I'm infallible either. And I think I don't see things all the time to do with gender. I miss them. In fact, sometimes my transness makes me miss other types of sexism that is around me, even though I was socialised as a woman. Like, I'll miss things that other people will pick up on because that's all they see and it's not directed at me. Like, I don't see like the same type of sexism as my female, like, women colleagues. So yeah, there's no way of fixing it other than listening and having a diverse group of employees that will bring to you their experiences and their requirements and their needs, and just building it out. And that's unfortunate, but the only thing that we can do is like try and learn from each other to a degree, and listening to podcasts like these where you listen to other people's experiences, and that's the best thing you can do, is learn from case studies and listening to what people have to say, because it's impossible to imagine other people's experiences.
For sure, I agree. Like, you serve those people best by asking them what they need, don't you? Like, ask them, how can we make this inclusive for you? Obviously, sometimes you might get competing needs, and you need to really do make a compromise. But your employees will know themselves best, and they know what they need within the workplace best. So do ask them. If you're really stuck and you do have the money for it, there are lots of different consultants, particularly catered to the creative industries as well, that do a lot of inclusion work as well. What I would say is just that use your own sort of tact to really decipher between two, because one consultant might say one thing, but another might say another thing, and they might be like, it might clash, they might not agree. So just be conscious of that, like get what's best for your studio. And yeah, there's lots of free resources out there as well if you do get stuck. ACAS do a bit of resources as well as like CIPD, where they're like the professional body for HR. So you can check out them when it comes to different resources. But yeah, like Aries said, just ask your employees, like they know what's best for them.
Someone actually sent in the DMs, so obviously there's that like one-on-one chats and catch up and check-ins, but that their studios do like a monthly all day, which is not necessarily like a social thing. They're talking about processes but also culture, and that's like another moment where they share their experiences. So I thought that was quite cool, because then you get to hear other people's voices, not just on that like kind of one-on-one basis. So on that note, what do you think on the daily, what can we do to make our studios feel more inclusive? It's easy to talk about what policy can we put in place and what can your boss do, but Wale, maybe you can answer first. What do you think on the day that we should all be doing to make the studio more inclusive?
Honestly, I guess a simple term would be to allow yourself to make mistakes. And to just also be open to receiving criticism on your character. It may not always be the best thing to hear, and it might suck in that hour or two, but it helps you grow. Because I feel like as a people, and it's not like a cancel culture thing, but it's more of like people are so scared of making mistakes, they try to kind of box themselves in, and then they're more prone to either going stale or stagnant. Where like say at our agency, I think because of Aries' current like position as being non-binary, there's more likely to cast a net out, so you get more people who are drawn from diverse backgrounds, and that also kind of like covers your bases. It also helps you learn different things, where I feel like if you're not really looking at it from that way, you lock yourself in and you just always kind of look at the same faces, you look at the same opinions, because at least I know that if I'm struggling with an idea, I can look at my colleague Anna, and they'll tell me like the most bizarre kind of like ish gallop of stuff, and I'm like, what the hell? I don't know what you just said, but thank you, because that's helped me like see things in a completely different way, and it's amazing. So I'm like, why don't you check out Brand New, or It's Nice That. Like, I don't want to do that. Can you show me something else?
Yeah, cool. Yi, what about you? What do you think? What do you think we can all be doing on the daily?
I think it's just having that open mind to like learning and listening. You know, like you might be working with the same people, but if you can take yourself out of that situation and like learn from other people, other cultures, and and read about it as well. Like there's so many free resources that we just don't sort of make the time to educate ourselves, and me included as well. Like I should be looking at more stuff and reading up about it, and not just coming in being a bit ignorant and be like, oh, I don't know, but I'll learn on the day kind of thing, and actually, educating yourself like actively.
Yeah. What would you like? This is maybe a slightly different question to you, Aries. What would you like your team to be doing? So when you're not there, what do you want them to be doing on the ground, to be looking out for each other and continuing practicing, I guess, what you're trying so hard to set out?
I think like the majority of this stuff comes down to just not making assumptions about anyone, and I think also what Yi and Wale both said about just listening and not being afraid to take criticism. Those three things are pretty universal, and like removing, or not removing because it will still happen, but like creating space for mistakes, improvement, education, and also creating an environment where people feel comfortable apologizing, learning something new, realizing that they're wrong, and being able to just address it instantly and be like, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't an okay thing to say, sorry, and never say it again. or you know, I misspoke, or you know, it happens. Like, it's totally normal. I think we don't want a cancel culture. We want a culture in workplaces, certainly, where people get better at things. And obviously, if they are really awful, they leave. They are asked to leave politely in the correct way. But I'm really blessed with a truly open-minded and open-hearted team who do a lot of those things every day anyway. So, but as Wale said, like, difference attracts difference. So, you know, as a leader of a studio where I have some intersections, although I have many advantages and privileges in my own life, I do attract a broad range of employees because of my identity. And that isn't the case for a lot of leaders. They are, you know, white men who are have been in industry a long time. So how do they appeal and attract and create workplaces that are better for marginalised people, underrepresented communities? It's a very tricky one. They have to do a lot of work, as I have, and you know, as they should. So yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning we haven't really... Oh, sorry, Ebony, were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to touch on what everyone said. Like, yeah, it's important to be open and important to be patient with not only yourself, but with other people as well. But I think it's also important to not feel the pressure to react quickly, especially to what's happening externally. I know a lot of organisations I've worked with have been like, oh, this person's doing this thing in terms of inclusion. This person's just hired an equality, justice and belonging manager. What are we doing? And it's like, just be focused on yourself and your own organisation, and be focused on your people, and really think about what you can do internally and not about what you can show externally. Because people like to do a lot of performative allyship, performative actions, and that can be really tokenistic, and they're not thinking about actually what do my team members actually want, what can I actually do for them internally. So yeah, don't be so quick to respond to everything happening in the outside world.
That's awesome. All right, last question, and I'll just get everyone to kind of list one thing, I guess. Why do we strive for it? What impact does inclusivity have on our work, on the studio? Like, why should we all be pushing so hard to be inclusive? Yeah, you just looked at me, you can go first.
Just for like happier humans, right? We just want to be happy and chill and actually make going to work not a dread. So yeah, just that. You want to go to work and be like, cool, it's going to be a sick day, or you don't want to be like, oh, fuck, Monday again.
Yeah. Ebony, why should we strive for it?
I mean, from a HR standpoint, there's of course like the Equality Act, so it's like a legal requirement for organisations to do that. But also personally, I feel like the stakes are just too high to not be inclusive. It has such a terrible impact on employees when we are not inclusive, on their mental health, on their physical health, on their financial well-being as well. It could impact whether they get a promotion or the career progression or not. And I feel like it's not enough to just be like, oh, we want to be inclusive because it looks great and it's great for our marketing and everybody else is doing it. Like, actually, we need to really think about how it impacts people and yeah, how it just enriches their work life, but also them personally as well.
Yeah, awesome. Wale, do you want to go?
Sure. I feel like inclusivity brings in people and stories you'd never expect. So whether it's the child who hasn't gone to university but they're in college, but they have so much to tell, they have a completely different perspective from, say, me. You bring that in, and then you also give them the chance to progress. Because I feel like when you're not inclusive, you don't see the ladder. So you think that, okay, I've joined the place, I'm going to stay as a junior for 5 years. But you probably have more skill and you have more potential to always ascend higher and move forward. So when you feel like you have an inclusive environment, you know how to kind of see the pathway. And I feel that's something a lot of people miss out on, sadly.
Yeah. Aries, how about you?
Well, I think we all currently live under capitalism, obviously, and being inclusive is one way to negate or try to negate how harmful capitalism is. And I think like that's what we can do. We have to go to work. We have to earn money. We have to do these things. We have to pay tax. Like we don't have a choice. So being inclusive is one way to, like you said, and basically make it not horrible, like make it not harmful, make it not hurt the people who are already hurting from society. Like we need to be doing as much as we can to improve people's lives and have a better time. And yeah, money is important. Let's not hurt people when they're just trying to make money, you know.
Totally. It's nice and optimistic way to end.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. I think the core message was optimism. If we join all four together. The only other thing I wanted to add, and it kind of touches into your point, Aries, which is we all need to make money. Comfortable people, happy people, people that feel safe, make really good work. I think Studio Moross is a good example of that. And people that are stressed and burnt out and tired and feel on the outside don't feel safe or in a place to put the weirder stuff down and to have those weirder ideas because they think they might be shut down. So if we're looking for business tangible reasons that everyone can agree with to create inclusive studios, then I can't think of a better one than making all the work better and bringing the standard of all the work up.
That's capitalistic though.
I know it is.
That's why I hate that result. Like happy people make better workers. They make better workers. They make more money for the company. You're totally right. That's a sentiment that always makes me feel uncomfortable when people say it, because it's like.
It's like the easy. It feels sometimes a little bit almost like the easy, not the easy win, but the easiest to digest, because it's like if you do X, Y, and Z, it's going to make your output better.
No, they say, you know, be more diverse, you'll make more money, you know. That's not the solution. That's not what diversity is about. Diversity is about equity. It's about bringing up people who are harmed and like making a better environment. It's not about making better work. Maybe the byproduct is that, but shouldn't be the pursuit.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm just a cynic.
No,
well, I think that's a nice way to look at it, is you go in from the problem rather than the solution. Right?
Absolutely.
It's going to be longer lasting.
And genuine.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow, I didn't get through all my questions. This always happens. This topic was absolutely huge, though. And it's, like I mentioned at the start, it's quite nuanced and it means different things to different people. So as you're listening, you know, take what you hear with a pinch of salt. Everyone's experience is different and everyone's opinions are really personal. And this is a subject that is huge and it's a tricky one to broach. So I feel like what we've done today is open lots of little doors that maybe are other conversations. Like we talked a lot about how do you be heard in your studio by your colleagues and by your boss. And that's probably an episode on its own, but we need to like start the ball rolling to kind of unlock what those conversations are. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for today, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Katie.
Cheers.
Thank you to everyone as well. Such great thoughts.
Yeah.